Most women wake up to the smell of coffee and the warmth of a husband's touch. I woke up to the sound of my life being sold for parts at 11:48 p.m. While I was supposed to be dreaming in our Manhattan brownstone, my husband was in the next room, his voice a low, calculated hum that didn't belong to the man I married. "She still doesn't suspect anything," he whispered into the dark. "Everything is going as planned. Almost done." In 10 seconds, the man who had kissed my forehead every morning for a decade transformed into a predator. He didn't know I was standing at the door. He didn't know I had just heard him describe my $500 million life's work as a carcass he was ready to pick clean. This is the story of how I stopped being a wife and started being a ghost in my own home, until I was ready to haunt him. I was 38, a successful author, and by all accounts, I was living the New York fairy tale. Mark was a financial consultant with a voice like velvet, the kind of voice that makes you feel safe enough to close your eyes. He handled the money. I wrote the books. It was a partnership of trust, or so I thought. But after that night at the office door, the velvet in his voice sounded like a shroud. I lay back in bed, keeping my breathing rhythmic and shallow as he slipped under the covers. When he reached out to pull me close, his skin felt like ice. He had no idea that the woman in his arms had just declared war. The next morning, I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost. I stood in front of the coffee maker, my hands trembling as I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened our banking app. I had been a good wife. I had been independent while letting him manage the boring details. But as the screen loaded, the boring details turned into a horror story. $1,000 here, $5,000 there, $2,000 to an account I didn't recognize, dozens of withdrawals over 3 months. It wasn't just a leak. It was a deliberate drainage of our joint assets. Checking the account this early? His voice came from the doorway. Casual, smooth, but there was a flicker of something, an electric spark of surprise in his eyes. "Just curious," I said, my voice steady despite the hammer of my heart. "Some of these charges look unfamiliar." He poured a cup of coffee and gave me that practiced, charming smile. "Small investments, honey. I must have forgotten to mention them. Nothing for you to worry about." That was his mistake. He thought nothing for you to worry about was a sedative. For me, it was a battle cry. For 2 days, I watched him. I noticed the way he turned his phone face down, the way he took calls in the hallway, the way he looked at me not with love, but with the calculated gaze of a man checking a timer. The window of opportunity opened when he went to shower, leaving his phone on the dining table. It was a rookie mistake, fueled by his own arrogance. He truly believed I was too creative and soft to be a threat. I had 60 seconds. I grabbed the phone. It was unlocked. I scrolled past work emails and group chats until I found a thread with no name, just a number. The last message read, "Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done." Ilium files. Stays in the dark. My stomach lurched. He wasn't just planning a divorce, he was orchestrating a heist. He was moving files, likely my intellectual property and my trust documents, to someone named Ilium. He was trying to strip me of the $500 million I had earned from my book royalties and investments before I even knew the marriage was over. I put the phone back. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. The fairy tale was dead. Now, I just had to make sure he didn't bury me with it. The next morning, I called Anna Prescott. She wasn't just my college roommate. She was a shark of an estate attorney. When I told her about the $500 million at stake and the Ilium message, the line went silent for a beat. "Caroline," she said, her voice like steel, "we need to move. Right now. If you wait for him to file, a judge might freeze your assets. We have to create a fortress before he strikes." The next 72 hours were a blur of adrenaline and ink. While Mark was at work, likely meeting with his co-conspirators, I was in a glass-walled office with Anna's team. We moved the title of the Manhattan brownstone into a private trust. We shifted my royalties into accounts he couldn't touch. We locked down my investments under a legal entity he had no claim to. By the time Mark came home on Friday, I was no longer a target. I was an empty vault. Mark walked in earlier than usual, looking smug in a tailored suit. He set a folder on the table, the same table where we'd shared 1,000 dinners. "We need to talk," he said. "I think it's for the best if we divorce. We've grown apart." He was waiting for the tears. He was waiting for me to beg. He wanted me to be the broken woman he could generously offer a settlement to. I didn't flinch. I opened the folder, glanced at the papers, and slid them back. "I agree," I said. "But before we go any further, there's something you should know. I've already moved everything. The apartment, the accounts, the royalties. It's all in a protected trust. You can't touch a dime of it." The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "You what? You can't do that." "I already did," I said, leaning forward. "You thought I was staying in the dark, Mark. But I've been holding the flashlight the whole time. See you in court." Mark didn't go quietly. He was a cornered animal now. 3 days after he stormed out, the smear campaign began. My assistant, Rachel, ran into my office with printout. An anonymous forum post was claiming that a prominent author was embezzling funds to hide money in a divorce. The comments explicitly named me, Caroline Whitman. He was trying to destroy my reputation to force a settlement. If I looked like a criminal, my protected trust wouldn't matter. "He's playing dirty," Anna said, looking at the screen. "He's desperate." "He's underestimated me for 10 years, I said, the fire in my chest turning to ice. "Let him keep doing it." But then the stakes got higher. Mark filed a counter lawsuit alleging financial fraud. He didn't come alone. He filed with a co-plaintiff, Ilium. It was the name from the text. Anna did a deep dive and found the truth. Ilium was a known financial fraudster specializing in forged documents. Mark hadn't just been moving money. He had been working with a professional to forge my signature on debt documents to make it look like I owed millions to shell companies. They were trying to bury me in fake debt to cancel out my $500 million fortune. The week before the trial was a war room. We brought in forensic accountants. We traced every digital footprint Mark had left. We found the Ilium files. They were digital templates of my signature, modified and stamped onto fraudulent loan agreements. When we walked into that courtroom, Mark looked twitchy. He kept glancing at the door, waiting for Ilium to show up and testify. Ilium never came. Anna presented the forensic evidence. She showed the judge the exact moment the signatures were forged. She showed the text messages. She showed the $500 million paper trail that led directly to Mark's secret accounts. The judge didn't just dismiss his claims. She eviscerated them. Mark was denied every cent. Because of his attempt to defraud the court and the defamation campaign, he was ordered to pay my legal fees and was hit with a massive fine. After the hearing, he tried to stop me in the hallway. He looked small. "Caroline, you didn't have to go this far." I looked him in the eye, the man who had kissed my forehead while planning my ruin. "No, Mark. You didn't have to go this far. I just finished the story you started." I walked out of that courthouse and into the New York sun. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I went to Central Park and watched the trees sway in the wind. I had lost a husband, but I had saved my life. Trust is a gift you give to others. But control? Control is the gift you give to yourself. Never hand it over. Not for love, not for a fairy tale, and especially not for a man who calls you his world, while he's trying to sell it. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap, like, it tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon, so the next story reaches you the moment it drops.